we got some good things to discuss this morning. So, welcome. So, don't matter what time it is that you're watching, but we're going to get right into it this morning. It's good that you're all here when you are here, that is. But yes, we had some deep meditation this morning. We've been going through some thoughts, and I know some people have been asking questions. So, then here's some things to go deeper. So, I want to just go into something. What if what we were taught, what if we were taught a smaller story of our existence? What if we were only given part of our stories? What if even the way we've been represented and taught religion has only been part of the stories? You know, there comes a point in life that when the old stories stop feeling complete, right? And that not because truth failed us, but because something deep inside of us begins to sense that the version we inherited was too small, too filtered, too controlled even, too afraid. And when that happens, well, the honest soul begins to ask a very different kind of question. What if we were taught a smaller story than reality? Have you ever thought about that? And what if the truth was never meant to keep us trapped in fear, but to awaken us into life itself? And what if the divine was never meant to be something far away, but something living within us? So this morning, you know what I want to I want to walk through that carefully. And none of this is as an attack to anyone's faith. So please understand that. I'm not here trying to get you to decide what to do. I'm here to make you think. You know, to expand your mind, ask questions, go deeper. You know, and not to attack anyone. And not as a demand that everyone believes the same thing either. I'm not saying that. But as a deeper inquiry into scripture, language, consciousness, philosophy, and the divine. To maybe look more than just scratching the surface. You know, we don't seem to pay attention sometimes. Because if truth is real, it can be examined. Right? And if something, and that's the thing that I've learned, is that truth, the beautiful thing about walking and being in truth is that it don't matter what anyone else says, it'll stand. So if something falls apart under honest examination, then maybe it was never truth in the first place. And that's okay. That's where things get revealed. I say go ahead, ask the question, ask them hard. See, there's a hunger for something deeper. And most of us people have these hungers, and a lot of people are exhausted from, and not just physically, spiritually. They're exhausted from being told what to believe without being allowed to ask why. Gosh, I remember when I was a kid, you know, I was raised in Sunday school and all these things. And I remember I would have all these questions, and I got told like it was dishonoring God by having these questions in the first place, and I was just supposed to have blind faith. But see, they're exhausted from hearing those words like love and grace while being handed fear and shame and control at the same time. So you see people going further, digging, studying, reading more, questioning more. They're exhausted from a system that says they point God, but often seem to point to power. And I want to say this clearly, that exhaustion is not weakness. It is often the beginning of awakening. Because the soul knows when something is missing. But see, there's never been anything missing. Because we've always been taught to go find things. See, the soul knows when a message is too small. See, the soul knows when a system has lost the living spirit behind the words. So if you have ever felt the tension, that tension you are not broken, you may simply be waking up. Let's talk about religion's biggest, Jesus and the heart of the divine. Let's start with that. because religion created this. Because if we are going to talk about divine, we have to talk about the one who kept pointing people away from empty religion. And back to the heart. Yet religion went and built a complete religion around him. See, he came to challenge the system. I don't know if anyone paid attention to that he confronted it and he exposed it. He kept showing that outward religion without inward transformation means absolutely very little and nothing at all. Yet, entire denominations and buildings have gone all over the world. He said people honor God with their lips, but their hearts are far away. See, that's not just rebuke of hypocrisy, that is a revelation. Because it tells us that the divine is not impressed by appearance or anything external. But yet we go to do all these external things. Now, I'm not attacking traditions. See, the divine is looking at the heart. Jesus kept turning people inward, and we don't even pay attention to that. He kept emphasizing sincerity, mercy, humility, compassion, and truth. He kept showing that the kingdom is not just a place. It's not something somewhere out there, but is here. It is a reality that begins within. Life begins within. Yet we're taught to idolize external belief systems and follow external structures, and it is a reality that begins within. And that is why even his teachings matter so much, because even in his teaching, we have even disregarded that. Because they do not invite us to obey rules ever. They do not invite us to look to authority. They actually invite us to be rebelling against it. They invite us to awaken. And the meaning, here's something shocking. We've been taught words mean something, but they have not meant them at all. The meaning Elohim is a very shocking one. Let's go into the scripture themselves. One of the most misunderstood words in the Bible is Elohim. See, most people were taught that Elohim simply means one singular God. But the Hebrew is more complex than that. And scholars had to even look at this and realize, even the Vatican has looked at this. Elohim is grammatically plural. That is real linguistic fact. Now, that does not mean everything should jump to simplistic and careless way, too. And you can't do it carelessly. But it says many gods. It even says that in John 10:34, I tell you the truth, not written in your laws, but you are all gods. Exactly. Plural. Gods. But it does not mean what we've been simply told now, does it? And that matters. See, we keep being told one. Oh, we are one. All of us. But yet something we were taught is completely opposite. And you see, language shapes theology. And theology shapes the way people imagine reality. Now think about this. There's been wars over this, and yet the word we've been taught does not mean at all what we've been taught. So when a word that is plural is used in a way that gets translated into taught as one singular, something important can be lost now, can't it? Not always intentionally, sometimes through tradition, sometimes through doctrine, systems, sometimes because later interpreted wanted the text to fit the particular framework they were looking for. And religion was created for mass manipulation and control. But whatever the reason, the result is the same. People often inherit simplified versions of something much deeper. And this is why scholars, theologians, and original language readers keep returning to the text. Well, and once those questions open, because the ancient language opens questions that later interpretations often tried to close. And once those questions open, the whole picture changes. See, what the original story may have been saying is if we slow down and read more carefully, some of the biblical language begins to look different than from what many people were even taught. So we've been taught lies and made to believe they were truth. So when the text speaks of divine counsel, language, heavenly beings, spiritual assemblies, powers, and unseen realms, it reveals worldview that is much larger than the flat modern version many people inherited. So the Bible is not always speaking in the simple terms we were given in church now, is it? Sometimes it is speaking in ancient symbolic language, and sometimes it is speaking in the language of spiritual cosmos. And sometimes it is pointing to realities that later theology tried to compress into a much narrow box. And this is why people who study the original Bible stories often find that the early language, the ancient context, and the later translations do not always line up in the way we were taught at all. And it does not mean the text is false. It means it is deeper than the simplified reading. It means the story deserves to be reread with humility. Hell and fear-based control. Let's talk about hell. Because this is one of the places where fear has been used the most heavily. A lot of people grew up believing that hell was separate eternal torture, right? That's what the system taught us. Chambers created by God for people who did not believe correctly. And that idea has shaped psychology of millions. But when we look at the original terms, the cultural background, and the history of translation, the picture becomes more complicated than what we were even given. Maybe the internal belief system. Some of the language often translated as hell refers to actual places, which was just a discussion of what it is to be in lack of. They were metaphors, allegorical, destruction, or warnings about spiritual or moral collapses. And over time, these images were explained into some more terrifying, and fear became one of the main ways religion kept people in line. But ask yourself this: if a message only works because it terrifies people into submission, is that really the heart of the divine? Or is that a human system built on control? See, that's not even what Jesus did not even seem to build his message on terror ever. If you pay attention to any of those, he called people to repentance, yes, but repentance means change of mind. Turning your ways from the fallen mindset. It means a turning and transitioning, a shifting, a reorientation towards truth. It means taking the blindfolds off. That is different, way different from spiritual intimidation. You know, the divine within. Now let's go deeper, because I want to be clear about where this teaching is really going, because I'm not trying to lead people to religion at all. I'm just trying to show the falseness, the BS we've been taught. And I'm trying to lead people into truth, to realize that the divine has been a within journey. You are it. And into realizing that the sacred is not only out there, somewhere waiting to be found. It's never been out there. Okay? That's just something that they taught you, to have something to fear. It's within. It has always been within and only within. It is also within consciousness self, within awareness, within deeper self. And that is why so many mystical traditions, including Gnostics, seem to, streams of thought keep returning to the idea of the divine truth is must be awakened inwardly. No, that is a complete lie. And even the greatest scholars have even just realized that. You can even go look it up, man. They've scholars are sitting down right now looking at the old Greek and Hebrew translations and going, oh, we were just discussing that. Even the word Elohim does not mean one God. It means gods. You've been misguidedly mistaught. We're just discussing about how we've been misguided and mistaught. But I mean, I get it. If that's your firm belief, then this is definitely not the place for you. You know, the divine truth is to be awakened inwardly, not just believed externally, not just inheritedly, not just repeated. Is awakened. This is the one of the deepest truths that the spiritual traditions keep pointing towards. Is that you do not simply learn the divine. You remember what you are. You uncover it. You return to it. And if this is true, then the real task of spiritual life is not obedience to an outer system alone or at all. It is an inner alignment. It is an internal journey. It is awakening to what has always been present. You know, it's called direct knowing, not blind belief, not secondhand religion, not fear-based conformity. Gnosis is the kind of knowing that comes from inner encounter. It is the awareness that reality is deeper than appearance, that the visible world is not all there, that is consciousness matters. That is the soul is not a mistake. That is the divine is not a distance. That is awakening is possible. That is why Gnosticism, continues to matter, because it's the knowing. It's being in the knowing. The challenge, the idea of salvation is only about external approvals. That the challenge is the idea that the truth only be meditated through institutions, is that they remind us that the divine is known inwardly, not just announced outwardly. Okay, it's not something outwardly. And that is why this is about liberating people, because they return to spiritual power, the person, not the ego, not the heresy, but the awakened consciousness. I mean, even in philosophy, Plato gave us one of the most important images for understanding human limitations, the cave. People see shadows and think they are reality, and they mistake the projection for truth, and they build their lives around what they have only partially seen. And when someone begins to point beyond shadows, resistance comes quickly. And that is because awakening is disruptive. It challenges identity. It challenges security. It challenges everything built on the old perception. This is not just philosophy. This is human life. People do it in religion. People do it in politics. They do it in culture. And they do it in their own minds. And so human beings have always had to fight their way through inherited illusions. And that is part of what makes this moment so important, because once you start seeing clearly, you cannot unsee. I mean, even science, because science at its best, it shows, that there is connection with the spiritual. And even sciences, we don't fully understand consciousness. We don't fully understand subject experience. We do not fully understand how awareness arises or what it is as its deepest level. And that matters, because if consciousness remains a mystery, then materialism is not the final answer. Many people were taught it was. All right? Hello, how's it going? So when people say spirituality is impossible because it is invisible, that is not reality. A scientific argument is an assumption, and an assumption can be challenged. And what science actually gives us is humility. You know, the deeper we go, the more we realize how much we do not know. The humility is healthy, you know, because it creates room for wonder. And wonder is often where truth begins. You know, ancient history and rereading the stories. You know, we have always sort of been taught about ancient history because when we go back into older civilizations, we will even find that humanity has long been wrestling the same questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? What is the divine? You know, why is there suffering? What is the relationship between seen and unseen? Older cultures often use myth symbols, cosmology, and sacred narrative and express realities that modern people reduce too quickly. And that means we may need to reread ancient texts with more respect and more depth, and maybe not have somebody always interpreting it the aspects of telling us what their idea of is, but we look deeper, we ask the questions, not just as a literal record, but as just paying attention, you know. Consciousness, spiritual, and experiences in the human condition. Let me tell you, it's why ancient wisdom matters, because it asks questions modern people are still afraid to ask today, and even religion gets afraid to ask. No wonder people get drawn to all sorts of things. And don't stop thinking. So what was Jesus actually really pointing to? Because even that's the funny thing. The guy that's been put in religion, and even Jesus was not trying to build a religious system. He was actually trying to tear it apart. He was trying to tear it apart. He was talking about how it was being used as a control system. And Jesus was showing us a way of being. And he was pointing us to a direct relationship with divine within. And this whole life was witness against spiritual performance and towards spiritual awakening. And yet we went and built whole religions and institutions over it. So what if the kingdom was something merely, never something external, but was always alive within you and me? Doesn't that change the whole frame when we look at it that way? Because when salvation is not about waiting to escape, it is about awakening now. It's about being restored to remembering the truth of the original design. It's about becoming conscious of now. And it is about letting the divine life rise within us now. So what if we were taught the smaller stories? And what if the translations were narrow than the original meanings? And what if religion often replaced direct knowing with indirect control? And what if Jesus came to reveal the heart of the divine, not just the structure of a religion, because he was never here to create religion. He came to destruct it. And what if Elohim points to reality richer than simplified versions we were inherited? And what if hell was used more for fear than as truth? Because it's all about our mindset. Misguided, missing the boat. And what if the divine was always within you and was never outside? See, you're right there. And we're only seeing from the projections of our own internal perspective. That's the crazy thing. And so what if the divine has always been within you this whole time? And that is the invitation, not to fear, not to perform, not to worship some image that was handed to us without question. Some creations that are going to come and haunt you and you're going to burn up like a little fork dude in there. But I mean, to awaken is to see, to remember, to return, because truth is never been trying to trap you. Truth is trying to free you. And the deepest freedom is not found in blind religion. It is found in the living encounter with the divine within. The kingdom has always been within, you know? It's not in a structured building. Heck, man, I find more peace in the divinity of just hanging out in nature. So it's the purest. And you're right, we see less than 1%. Those are good questions. See, well, no, internal journeys, they're more fun. All right, everybody. Peace and love. We'll catch you later.